Hi and welcome to this video. My name is Paul Conroy from the Nourished Hoof, and in this video I'm going to talk about the basic principles of hoof moisture, hoof management, dealing with the environment, dealing with the weather. Again, these are just rough guidelines based on anatomy, based on how things work. For those who don't know me, I'm a farrier. I've been for 30 years. I teach at one of the UK colleges, so I'm a lecturer in farriery now. I have a keen interest in anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, diseases, and biomechanics as well. I studied anatomy a lot, more than most, obviously from a teaching role. And it's from that sort of understanding of anatomy and love of anatomy and sort of understanding the hoof after 30 years. I've seen a lot of them, been in practice a long time. Is what motivated me to design these sort of unique products that are part of the Nourished Hoof company. And I will sort of explain how moisture works in a simple way, hopefully. So again, welcome to our hoof. It's appeared in a few videos. Okay, so moisture itself. Now, the horse's hoof is perfectly capable of withstanding all environmental conditions, although it's kind of the horse belongs in dry, arid conditions, and it can handle dry, arid conditions as long as the horse is, nourished and the nutrition's right and it's getting its what is required. Then a lot of the hydration will come from the blood supply, as long as the blood is healthy and everything that needs to be in there is in there. What horses don't like, sorry, I'm jumping on. Wet conditions, less so. They don't really belong in sort of wetlands. It doesn't do the feet any good, particularly donkeys. Donkeys absolutely do not belong. I'd go as far as say it's in the UK in general, really. The donkeys don't do well in the softer feet, just the way the feet are. Again, I don't want to get into donkey anatomy specifically, but it is a good example of how the sort of equine can struggle in some wet conditions. That said, if it's consistently wet, generally it's not too bad, and if it's consistently dry, it's not too bad. The problem is, which sums up the UK weather, is this switching between one and the other all the time. You know, warm weather, wet, dry, wet, dry. The hoof just cannot handle those two conditions within a day sometimes, but certainly a week of dry and then a week of wet and a week of dry, so summertime, is particularly bad for horses' feet. What horses' feet like more than anything else is consistency. Again, as a practicing farrier, the two seasons where you tend to see feet explode is spring and autumn, as the seasons change. Generally winter and high summer. High summer, if the horse owner plays the game with hoof moisture, then generally you don't get too many problems if the weather's settled. The feet will adjust. It's these variations, these sort of cold to warm, wet to dry, what destroys horses' feet. So spring is an important time, as is summer. Is once the weather, for me, when it comes to moisture, you want to add moisture in the summer and try to slow down the rate at which the foot ingests water in the winter time. So we'll deal with spring and summer first. So in spring and summer, when the weather changes and it starts to become warm, as a general rule, once it gets to sort of 12-15 degrees and there hasn't been any rain, then what you want to do is you want to start to put a moisturizer onto the foot, onto the sole, onto the frog, onto the wall itself and around the coronary band, just to slow down the rate at which the foot is going to dry out. Things like loose shoes, risen clenches happen in these dry months, not because your farrier hasn't done the clenches properly. What happens is your farrier puts essentially the clenches flush to the hoof wall. If the hoof wall, so if imagine we've got a clench now flush with the hoof wall, clenches the tops of the nails that you can see when your farrier shod your horse just here, usually 3 on either side, but not always, sometimes more, particularly on the big ones, sometimes less, but you can see the nail heads. If the hoof then loses moisture, anything that loses moisture will shrink, just like anything that ingests moisture will get bigger. The same happens in winter, but in reverse. What happens is the hoof will shrink, but the clenches that were clenched to the hoof on that day obviously they're made of metal, they're not going to shrink at the same rate. They don't shrink at all. So the hoof gets smaller, the clenches stay where they were, and then before you know it, you have risen clenches, followed by loose shoes, followed by lost shoes. By maintaining the moisture in the hoof and slowing down the rate at which it dries out will certainly prevent that problem from happening. And secondly, it will help to keep essentially the hoof nourished, supple. When load is applied to this hoof capsule, it bends, the heels bend outwards, the toe bends inwards. That way, as weight is borne across essentially the laminal interface, across the laminal bed, this hoof wall will bend in, the sole will drop and then spring back again. So you need elasticity for all this to happen. The drier it is, the load remains the same, it will bend, like any structure will bend so far, and then it will break and snap. Then you get cracks in the hoof, fissures appearing in the hoof wall, and all the problems associated with that. And if we stem it all the way back, it's really the change in temperature that's done it, and the tendency for it to go really, really dry. Hydration will drop in the summer, so any hydration that we can add to the hoof, particularly around the coronary band in the summer months, then it will help to slow down that dry out rate. The opposite is kind of true in winter. Once we get to autumn and we suddenly start to get lots of rain into winter, and the horses are turned out in muddy fields and all of that, we all know what the fields are like in the UK in the winter months. Then the opposite problem that happens, they're submerged in wet, muddy conditions. Water is very good at getting in things, and the hoof will go the other way. It will start to expand and it will start to split from the inside and push the hoof wall out. Again, it will push the clenches up as it's getting, the farrier will clench it to the hoof. The hoof then gets bigger and it will force the clenches then in the side of the foot to essentially rise up. Loose shoes, lost shoes. So really, in the winter, what we need to try and do is reduce or repel some of the water that's in the air, and again, put a dressing on that's going to stay on the hoof in the winter months and help to repel some of this water and some of the water damage that you see in the foot. So you can see that the moisture is the moisture problem is an all year round problem, and the aim of the game really is to try and keep things as consistent as possible. You're not necessarily trying to put extra moisture in, you're just trying to keep it consistent. So when it's hot, you need to add moisture to keep it the same. When it's wet, you want to stop even more moisture getting in if at all possible, and stop it from getting in too much water. So things like not turning out if the fields are like day 3 of the Battle of the Somme, then don't turn it out or limit turnout. When you do that, you've got another problem that the horse is in, so it's no longer being exposed to water, so it will start to dry out rapidly. You can offset that by again putting some moisturizer on the hoof to slow down the rate at which it dries out, because this ruins the structure of the horn tubules, as essentially they get bigger and then they get smaller, bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller, and then eventually it just ruins them and they'll break. So, you know, not turning your horse out in muddy conditions is a good thing as long as you act accordingly and think about maintaining moisture in the hoof. So it might be worth then putting some form of moisturizer on the hoof dressing to slow down that growth rate. And then when you turn out again, put something on that's going to repel water and try and stop the ingestion of water. So there is no silver bullet when it comes to this problem. It is down to you as the horse owner to play your part, play your role, and 5 minutes a day invested in your horse's feet will pay dividends. And I'll leave you with arguably the most true statement in the horse world, which is no foot, no horse. Truly is a true saying. Without the foundations of then the horse is not really going to be a useful animal going forward. And any of you who've had foot problems will certainly be able to relate to that. So yeah, I hope that makes sense, and I'll see you on the next video.